Good morning. Thank you for joining me for week 2. So, for those of you that were with us last week, I gave you an overview of the challenges that the women face in the variety of countries that we work in. And then this week, we are going to focus on the evolution of how Lift Her Up is working with the women to help empower them to empower themselves. But please feel free to ask questions as we go. Either they can bring the mic or I can repeat the question for those on Zoom. So first question, have you walked or used some of your meager savings to get to a bank to apply for a loan and they ask you for your ID, but you don't have one? So many of the challenges that the women face is that if they were going to get a loan from a bank, they would need to be able to supply documentation such as an ID or a credit score. These women do not have IDs. They don't have credit scores. They don't have any form of identification or other records of past use that they have had. And so that is just one of the many barriers that these women have if they were going to try to get loans through the traditional process. So that is why we look for opportunities to help these women in a different way. So when creating a structure for the Lift Her Up Foundation to help these women, I leaned heavily on my partners in Uganda to help me structure a loan process that was going to meet the women where they were. It was important for me to structure it in a way that would be beneficial to them and the highest chance of pushing them toward success. Before a woman can apply for a loan, she has to have completed one of the financial literacy courses that we talked about last week. And then she also is going to be doing some basic math with our local partners, showing that she has the ability to look at her cost of goods, keep proper bookkeeping for her business so that we know that she's able to not only manage her own money, but manage the money for the loan that we're going to be giving her. So, and all of our loans run through our local nonprofit partners. And so that's why it's so important that we have these partners in the different countries that we work, because they are the ones that are helping us. They are the ones who actually have the relationship with the women. So when the women want to apply for a loan, they are reaching out to our local partners. These are the organizations that already gave them the skills training, and they're the organization that helped put on the financial literacy courses that we help them build. And they have those ongoing relationships with the women. We have no interest in being a standalone organization in any of these countries that we work in. We just want to be a piece of what these other organizations are able to offer for the women. They don't need another organization. We just want to be able to expand their ability to serve the women in their communities. So the next important part of this loan is, as we said, it starts with them having these financial literacy classes. The next one in is that these loans are matching. So this was a big piece when we were talking with our local partners, is that we don't just want to give them a loan, but we want to encourage them to save and invest their own money. So when the women want to get a loan, they first have to save their own money that they're going to invest into their business with us. So it started as a 50-50 loan, but then we since have moved it on to, we give them the opportunity that they might be able to do 75% loan from us, 25% of their own money that they saved. But they do need to show our local partner that they didn't just save that money, but they are investing it into the business along with the loan that we're giving them. And we feel like that's very important, because even if they're only investing $25 of their own money, to them, that is a lot of money. And so we want them to be doing that because A, Hopefully that means that they did a lot of thinking about whether or not they think this business is going to be successful because they invested their own money into it, not just ours. And also, it's giving them that feeling of this wasn't just a handout. This was assistance, and they are also helping themselves, not just us helping them. And our local partners in all of the areas that we work, these are some of our local partners, all agree that that is a very important piece of what we're doing. So every time they are applying for a loan, they are showing the money that they have saved that they will invest in the business along with our money. So some of the businesses. And then the next part is that we wanted the loan to be an amount that they would be able to pay back in a 6-month period of time. Because if the loan is too large, it can become overwhelming. And then they're like, oh, I'm never going to get out from underneath this loan. I'm just going to walk away. But when the loan is a little bit smaller and it's something that they can pay back in a short period of time, it makes them feel like this is something they're going to be able to accomplish. If they need more money, as soon as they pay their loan back, they can apply for another loan. But we've had some programs where they did a year-long loan, and we saw it was a little too long. It just got to be too overbearing for these women to think about that they had that quantity of money to pay back. So that's where we decided on the 6-month loan. Every once in a while, we have a circumstance that we have to go a little bit outside of that. For example, I had some women who do beekeeping, and they needed to buy some actual hard materials to do this. And the loan they were going to need for that was more than they'd be able to pay back in 6 months. So along with the conversation that we have with our local partner, we do make exceptions because we want to be able to service the women, but that's not the way that we want all of our loans to go. And again, why our local partners are so important. I don't know what is required from a material standpoint for one of these women to start raising bees, but they do. And so they can say, yes, this is a circumstance where we do actually think they need this larger loan, but we're talking them through that process of how it's going to take them a longer amount of time to pay it back. And they also, they continue to give them these financial coaching that we've talked about is, okay, where in the process do you think you're going to be able to start making your loan payments? Because we do allow them to have a grace period in the beginning if our local partner thinks it's appropriate. If they're selling something like food, that's usually something that they are going to start making incremental money almost immediately. So we want them to start making payments right away, because then they get into the habit of a little bit of my money each day or each week needs to go toward paying my loan back. Where if somebody else is doing something like raising livestock or farming, they have to wait until the time comes that they're selling their good. And so they'll have to wait longer before they start making their payments back. Again, why our local partners are so important. Yes.
Question. Here, we typically with loans, they have property or some kind of an asset they secure against it. These people have to provide that kind of a thing, or is there no connection?
Yes, they do not have typically any form of collateral. So really the collateral that we have is a relationship they have with our local partner. That is the collateral because they don't have any. And I had shared last week some stories that I'd heard in Bangladesh about how when people didn't pay their loans back, the organization came and took some of their livestock as repayment. And we said, we're not going to advertise the fact that if they get into a hard situation and they can't pay their loan back, that we're going to take something. We would never take anything. I should say, we are not going to advertise that we would forgive the loan. Because yeah, we wouldn't want to go and take the few things that they have. Because we've seen when women aren't paying their loans back, it's not because they took the money and ran. It's because something happened. And we don't need to make that circumstance worse by coming and taking the few items that they have. So our local partners know that, but they don't advertise that to the women. So good question. So then, yes, so these loan amounts are something that they can repay in a reasonable amount of time. And then the last piece is the interest rate. So this was a conversation that we had with a lot of our partners as we talked about what interest rate should we have? Should we perhaps have no interest rate? Because that would give them obviously a better leg up of moving forward. But the local partners felt that it was important to give them some interest rate. And part of the reason that we do this is because we are having them practice, just like if they got a loan from a bank, there is going to be an interest rate. So we are trying to use this again as a teaching opportunity. So while the interest rate is small, they do still have one. And so they're learning the math and they're learning the requirements that a regular institution might expect from them. But the interest that we collect from them, we do not take that money back. We give it to our local partner. So all of the interest that is collected is given to that partner to help offset some of the work that they do to assist us in putting these loans together. So, yes. Oh, and actually I had a conversation about saying that they don't have any collateral. But we really have learned that the commitment that they have to sticking with these organizations is really powerful to see that they want to be able, they just want to succeed for themselves, but they also want to succeed for these organizations to show them that all of this work that they put into them has actually been paying off. I'm going to take this earring out. I think I'm messing up the mic. Okay. So let's talk about some of the results. At this point, we have a very high return on our loans. I would say on average, if we gave out 10 loans, we have 7 that have probably just paid pretty much as expected. And then we have a few others who need a little bit of assistance. And we've been really encouraging not only the local partner to come around them, but also the other women who are getting loans to come around the ones that are struggling so that they can help support them. Most often when we see somebody not repaying their loan, it's typically one of 2 things. Family illness is a huge one. So if their child gets malaria, they're going to take the money out of their business or anywhere else to try to get the medicine to go pay for treatment. Because they don't have health insurance like we have. And then the other one would be outside influences. So this can be environmental and government. So we will see them make sweeping changes to a process. I have a woman who does fishing in Uganda, and the government made a change to that type of fish. And so she lost her business overnight because she was no longer allowed to farm the fish the way she had in the past and without any warning as well. So that happens a lot. And then some of the environmental changes, like when I was talking about some of the climate change that some of these countries are experiencing, it's affecting the way that they're able to farm. So if they normally were able to raise vegetables a certain time of year, now if the flooding happens, it wipes out their ability for some of their crops to be successful. So those are the issues that we most often see the women facing. But when they're not getting their loans paid back, we're really encouraging the organization to not be looking for, hey, where's my payment? Where's my payment? What's happening? What's wrong? Because if they're not paying us back, they're also likely not getting any money to support themselves. So yes, we want them to pay their loan back, but we want them to be successful supporting themselves. So it's, I would say maybe 1 in every 20 to 15 do we just not get any of the remaining money back. And most of the time the organizations have shared with me what the circumstance was, why they didn't pay back. And like we said before, we're not going in and taking their cattle when a family member died and their business fell apart because of that. So we talk to the organization and say, okay, in the future, if there's things that we can do to support this woman, please tell us. And I don't want her to feel shame that she can't come back to the group. So you don't need to share with the group that she hasn't paid her loan back. Please try to encourage her to come back into the fold because she needs the support of the other women in the group for whatever is forcing her to not be able to have a successful business. So we can talk about some of our local partners and the loans that we've had with them. So these are a couple of our groups in Uganda. So Monica, she got a loan. So they have fish that are called silverfish. It kind of looks like an anchovy, and it's a common fish for them to farm. It has high protein, and they will dry it. So actually what's in that pile is a bunch of dried, think of them as anchovies. And they can put them in soups. They can put them in a variety of dishes. They can keep them for a long time because they're dried. So it's a pretty good business. And with her loan, she was actually able to expand it where her mom does the drying on the island. There is Lake Victoria there, which is a very large lake. And so there's islands in it. So her mom is on the island doing the drying. And then she has the fish brought over to the mainland. And then she goes and sells it. So her loan allowed her to expand and better function. And then Dorothy, she had always wanted to be able to raise cows for milk and meat. So with her loan, she bought her first calf, and now she has 3 cows. And so she sells the milk, and then whenever is the appropriate time, she will also sell the cow for the meat. And then Passy, she runs a small shop. These shops are very common. You see them all over. But she used her loan and her financial literacy classes to figure out what products in her shop have a higher profit margin. Before that, she had never thought about the profit margin between one item and another item. She used her loan to buy some of the more high profit items leading up to the holiday season when people were going to be having a little bit more disposable income to be spending in her shop. So that was a really cool one because it was a combination of getting the loan, but also getting the financial literacy. Irene, she also has a little shop. This is her sitting in it. And she was able to expand some of the items that she offers in her shop. Sylvia. So Sylvia does secondhand clothes. So the secondhand clothes market, this one is in Uganda, but it's across Africa. It's a very interesting process. I don't actually know. I'd love to see some documentary of how it works because, you know, we send our clothes to Goodwill and they eventually get shipped sometimes if they don't sell. But when they're buying clothes here, they're put in these bales as you see behind her, and they're organized. So they have rating like 1, 2, 3 of quality, but it's also divided up in types of clothes. So like she can buy a bale that is only men's pants. But I would love to know like who is doing this organization. Maybe in China. I mean, I know that we ship some stuff there because we have empty shipping containers going there, but I honestly don't know the process of how the clothes come from us donating it to them purchasing it in a bale. But I would love to see a documentary or talk to somebody who knows how that process happens. But what she did was before having a loan, she would just buy a little bit of clothes in the market and then she'd take them back to a village area and sell them along the street. But instead, with the loan, she was able to buy a bale. And so once she sold the bale of clothes, they gave her enough money to buy the next bale. And so it was really that difference of she never had enough money to buy a bale. She could only buy pieces. So just that one loan made the difference that she could hop up in the hierarchy of how these clothes are sold. So instead of her buying pieces and taking them to the street, she now has a little section of a shop where people come to her and they get the pieces and they're probably taking them back to the village. And she's been a really good educator of other women. She's one of my few women when we were talking last week about whether or not they get into new relationships. She, as far as I know, is not in a new relationship. She has her kids and she is able to support herself doing this without having to seek out a man. And she's really helping other women to try to do the same thing. Her past relationship, I think, was quite abusive. And now she's able to make ends meet on her own. So it's really cool to see what she's doing. And then Miriam, again, this is another great one where the financial literacy came into play. I think I mentioned this last week, that some people are selling a variety of items, but not knowing what type of profit they're making. So she used to be selling chapati, which is a bread, just kind of like a naan bread that they sell on the street. And then she ended up switching to selling these, it's corn. So they roast the corn and they have it on the street. They have a higher profit margin with that than she could do from the bread. So we had her switch. And that was a common thing that we did see once these women started being able to do the math and figure out the ingredients. And we kind of had to push them and say, okay, how much flour do you use? How, depending on the item that they're making, so that we would be able to figure out what it costs them to make the items that they are selling. Another common item that they sell there, it's called a Rolex. And so it is a piece of bread and it has egg inside of it, and they roll it up on the street, and they can just have like a single hot pan on the street to be able to make these roll-ups to sell. As we were talking to people, they all sell for the same price, but different people had different ingredients. And so then we figured out, okay, some of them were making money because they were able to have lower price ingredients. Other people weren't. Were you going to ask a question? Oh, okay. And I laugh, when I had gotten to Uganda, I had a problem trying to get money out because our ATM cards don't work there. So I went several days without having any money, and the gal that I was staying with had to cover me. So once I actually managed to get my own money, I laughed that I was getting Rolexes for everybody on the street. But I think a Rolex is maybe 50 cents. But people frequently have it for lunch, and it's has a fair amount of food in it. So then those were some of our success stories, but then these are some of our newer loans. And I know I didn't touch too much on Brazil in my last presentation, but these are some of our more recent loans. So I wanted to share them with you. So Teresa, she creates home decor pieces. So then she used her loan to buy the raw materials. And all of these women live in the favelas that we work in Rio de Janeiro. So the favelas are controlled by one of three organizations. They're either controlled by the government, the militia, or the cartel. And so each one of them, there's advantages and disadvantages. We work in the favelas that are controlled by the cartels. And while it may seem there's aspects of it that's more dangerous, they have a lot of control in their favelas. And so things are very well run. For example, you can walk into the favela and they are selling drugs like you would sell vegetables on a tray. You can walk up and buy heroin or whatever other drugs that they have, but you cannot use them. So when you're in the streets of these favelas, you never see anybody using drugs. They can buy the drugs, they cannot use the drugs there, because that's one of the rules that they have over their communities to try to keep them safe and well run. And they're also they were building a skill center when I was there. The cartels were using their money, building a skill center in their favela. So while there are some downsides to them, they're some of the more well-run favelas, and that's why we chose to work in those. So all of these women are running these businesses within the favelas that they live in. So the next lady, she was creating rugs. So she used her loan to purchase a machine so that she could make her products faster. And then Jessica, she bakes cakes for parties. So she used her loan to buy an electric mixer. And we like when the women are buying hard goods if it is appropriate for their business, because then we know it's not something that's going to get used up personally. The mixer is to make her cakes. It's not just going to walk off. And then our next one, Lillian, she does custom fashion. So she used her loan for materials, but then she also used it to do some advertising on social media. And so we do talk with the women in the areas that they live. What does advertising look like for them? So these women they do have social media where a lot of the women in our African countries would not. But she did use some of that to run some advertisements. And then Veronica, she does baby products. So she used it to use her loan to buy some raw goods. And then Camila, she does leather bags and journals. So she also used her loan to purchase some variety of tools to make her process a little bit quicker. So they're getting close to their 6-month mark with the loans that we have out with them. So when I speak with our partner group there, kind of like I shared before, we have several of the women who are totally paid up. And then we have a couple of women who are struggling. And so I had the same conversation with him as I had with some of my others and said, you know, what can we do to come around these women, and can the other women help support them, help figure out if it is actually their business that is struggling versus a family problem? Can some of the other women who have successful businesses try to help them figure out where is the problem? You know, is it goods? Is it marketing? Is it execution? And I'm hoping that these women will get closer to each other so that they can continue to support each other. So that gives an overview of the loans that we had been doing up until last year. That was our structure of how we did our loans. It's always through our local partner, giving loans to individual women to support the businesses that they're doing after they have met our requirements. But this past winter, I spent all of my time in Africa, as I shared last time. And I like the fact that I'm able to spend enough time there that I can learn how things work for them. And instead of me trying to figure out in a short period of time what we can do, I get enough time with these women that they can tell me what they need. And so that really requires time in these countries. That's not going to happen in a short period of time. We need the walls to come down. They need to be vulnerable enough with me to share what I could do, because they'll ask for things. Maybe I'll say yes, maybe I'll say no, and they have to feel comfortable enough to ask. And so our new loan program really came out of the time that I spent in these countries, learning the way that they function. You know, as they say, what's the proverb of necessity is the mother of invention. And that is what a lot of these women are doing. They are in these rural areas that has no access to banking. And so they are looking for ways to correct the problem for themselves. And we are coming alongside them. So let me just catch up in my notes one second. So this is a new program that we are running in Congo, Burundi, and Cameroon, based off of the time that I spent with them this past winter. So question for you, how would it feel to be able to repay a loan knowing that it gave you the dignity of providing for your family without charity? So that's what these women are doing. They are giving each other this opportunity to be able to help themselves without just a handout. So after having a lot of conversations with women, I learned that a common thing that they will do, and they each have different names for it, but basically it's called a village savings and loans is what we call it. They have these group savings. So women will come together, 25, 40 women in these very rural areas. They will come together and they will start saving money together. And so these groups, I was frequently attending their meetings, trying to learn how they function and what we might be able to do to help them in their process. So these women were learning to dry fish, but it was many of the women in that group are in these village savings and loans together. So another one of our meetings. So another question. How would your life change if you could borrow even $50 without an ID, a credit score, or collateral? Like we were saying before, if they ever did try to get to a bank would ask them for some of this information, which they do not have. And so that is why they are creating other options for themselves so that they can support each other in a way that works within their own world. So these are grassroots financial institutions. I'm going to use the word bank. These are not banks in any form of institution. It is just a group of women. I'll frequently say piggy bank because it helps remember that this has no institution connected to it. And the most successful groups that come together, they will meet probably weekly or every other week together. And they are bringing in each other from their local community. Most of them can walk to their meetings, and then they will gather. And when they gather, everybody they're putting in deposits into the bank, just like a piggy bank. So they're saving. So every time they come to their meeting, they have a minimum requirement of money that they have to put in. And I would say a lot of these would probably be maybe $1 a meeting equivalent, but this is an opportunity for them to save. So another question. If your kid was sick and the clinic fees was $5, but you didn't have it, How would you find the money? Well, this is a situation that frequently happens to these women. And so part of what they do in their group is help to solve this. And they do this by, in addition to the $1 that they have to put in, they also put a small amount of money into this other fund. And so when something happens in one of these women's lives, a kid gets sick, a husband dies, they have a little bit of money to help these women, but it's not a loan. It is just helping each other. And so it solves one of these big problems that people face, is that everything can fall apart when they don't have just that $5. And so again, these women are figuring out ways to be able to help each other. So they have these banks. And so then the money is kept. Some of the groups of our women coming together. So when these women are collecting the money, this is an opportunity for them to save. And I will show you a picture after my next question. If the only way you had to save money was at home, would you feel safe and would you be tempted to use that money? That's another thing that these women face, and this organization helps them to figure out a better use for it, is that they can save the money within this group piggy bank. And so when they bring their money together, it is literally, and I'll have a picture coming up, they put it into a wood box and they have 3 locks on it, and 3 different ladies have the keys to the lock of this box. So they really are creating their own piggy bank. And inside of the box is a ledger. So that is the bank's ledger. And then each woman has her own ledger that she then compares. So when she puts in a deposit, she writes down that she put in $1, they write down that she put in $1, they double check it so everybody knows what's happening. So again, they are kind of creating their own checkbooks. So you'll see this is actually one of the boxes. And so on each side is one of the locks. So when they got together, everybody brought their key and they opened up the box and got out the ledger. So then the deposits that the women make into this bank, they then use to give each other loans. So now they have deposits, and so they take these deposits and the women will apply within their group for a loan. And the beautiful thing is the women in the group are the ones deciding who's getting a loan. So they elect a board within their group, and those women are the ones who are deciding who gets a loan, how long do they have to pay it back. So I love that all of this is being run by the women. It's not being run by some outside organization. And they collectively decide what interest rate they are going to charge each other. So this is not only an opportunity to save money, but it's an opportunity for them to make a profit because they are charging each other interest. So another question. Have you ever been part of a group where everyone's success depends on everyone's combined commitment? That is a huge part of this group, is that these women are working together. And the only way that they're going to be successful is if everybody is committed to the same end goal of having success. And so these groups, not only do they come together financially, but they really come together starting to support each other. When I'm in some of the markets, the women will be running their businesses next to each other. And they're all in this same savings group together. And they're like, oh yeah, Sally's kid is sick, so I'm looking over her stall today. Before these groups happen, I asked them, I said, well, what would you have done before? And they said, yeah, my stall would have been closed that day. So it's so huge to see. It's not just a financial opportunity for these women, but a way for them to work together and support each other in these areas. So here's some of them learning to make soap. So some of the groups do, oh, sorry, did you have a question? Please.
Did somebody help these women initially start these groups then?
Some of these groups are supported by some of our local partners, and some of these groups are just women figuring out ways to deal with the issues that they face in their communities.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank
So it's a
you.
combination. Yeah.
You talk about local partners. Where do they get their money to give loans?
So the local partners, depending on which organization it is, we might be their only opportunity to give loans, but their funding sometimes comes locally, but a lot of times they will get grants and things that are, like there's one called Girls Not Brides that quite a few of my organizations gets grants from. And that one's based out of London, I think. So a lot of times they are applying for grants in other countries, because there's just not a lot of opportunity for them to get local support, because there's not a lot of money locally. So in some of these groups, they decide how they want to look at collateral. So some groups will actually have a co-signer. So if you want to get a loan, you have to bring Emily with you. And she says, okay, if Sarah doesn't pay her loan back, Emily's going to pay it for her. So each of these groups are finding different ways to keep each other accountable, because they want their bank to be successful, because that's the only way that they're going to make a profit from their bank, is if everybody's actually paying their loan back. So the way that this piggy bank works, though, is at the end of the calendar year, they dissolve the bank. So everybody gets their deposits back, and then everybody gets their portion of the profits from the interest that they charged each other. So this works not only as a way to save money, but it's also an opportunity to actually make some money from each other's loan profits. So that is why they keep running it on the annual basis. And then they start again, the very next year, but they dissolve it so everybody can get their money back. But when we were doing some of our financial literacy with these groups, we talked about, okay, when you get that money at the end of the year, what are you going to do with it? Yes, they have some things that, they need to pay school fees, that type of thing. But we really encourage them to say, could you take even a small percentage of the savings that you get back and invest it in yourself, your business that you're doing, something that is more than just buying shoes for school and books? But is there a way for you to take some of this savings to empower yourself? And so those ongoing financial conversations are always happening. So while these community-based banks are critical to the success for these women and the communities, the biggest problem that they told me is they're limited by their deposits. So if they have $25 worth of deposits, they only have $25 worth of loans that they can give each other. And so that's where our new pilot program came, is that we are going to act, and we have already started these, we're acting like a local Federal Reserve. So we are giving these banks loans, each a little bit each month, so that it's increasing their capability to give each other loans. So here's a couple of our VSLA groups. So when they are doing this, so here's a few of their loans that they're getting. So the way that we decided to structure it was that we don't want to disrupt their ecosystem by either giving them too much money or giving them too much money all at once. So each month we are giving them a small loan, and it's about 50% of their deposits. So we're increasing their capacity, but we're not changing their system by giving them 4 times their deposits, even though for us it would be a small amount of money. So our local partners helped in making those decisions, along with the women who are running these individual banks. And so each month, these banks are getting a small loan from us, so that now instead of only being able to loan $50, they can loan $75. And so it's increasing their capacity, but nothing's changing. The women are still running the group, and the women are still the ones making the decisions about who's getting a loan. And so that's what I really love about this, is that it is keeping all of the power in the hands of the women. Because with my other loans, I have to rely on my local partners to help make the decision of who's going to get a loan. Where with this, these women are the ones deciding who's getting a loan. And who knows better about getting a loan to grow rice than the lady next door who's growing beans or growing corn? Yes.
Sarah, you're saying, whoa, would they dissolve the bank? Does your organization get that funds back? There.
Yeah, I will get to that in one moment, but good question. So when we give them these small loans each month, they continue to give their loans, collect their loans. And then to your question, at the end of the year, before they dissolve the bank, they have to pay the loan back to us. But we're not charging interest. We're giving them these loans with just principal, no interest, so that they have the ability to not only increase their capacity of loans, but also increase their profits because they're getting the profit off of these additional loans. And so at the end of the year, their profits will go up even after they pay us back that principal.
Of a group size.
Mhm. Yep. So our most common size that we see is usually between 25 and 50. However, I had a group in Burundi that was up to about 150 women. And so the conversation that we had with them is perhaps you guys need to split this up into some smaller groups because you start to lose that accountability to each other. When there's too many people, you don't know everybody as well. And I think it's easier to not fulfill on the requirements that the bank is giving you when it gets too big. But these organizations are run by the women themselves. So they're the ones who get to make these decisions, but the organization or we will sometimes give suggestions.
5% of the women that could potentially participate are participating, or what kind of percentage of people involved?
I'll have to say, I don't know the answer to that. I think a decent amount of the women do participate in groups like this, but from a percentage standpoint, I don't know. Because some of these villages are pretty small. So even having a group of 25 or 40 women is probably a decent percentage of the women who might participate.
If I could surprise you here, we have similar activities, not as formal, but in the Hispanic population here in Holland, I ran a cleaning company for 20 years, and there are groups like this that participate, and they have the same general model, a little different, but they in fact do the same thing. And
I have heard that there are saving circles here. And one of the styles that I think they have here as well as there is sometimes the saving circle will be an actual circle, meaning everybody comes in and everybody puts in, their $1 each month, something like that. And each month, one person gets the funds. But when we talk to these women about that model versus closer to what we would call a village savings and loans, is that you might not get the loan when you actually need it. You just get it when it's your turn. And so we've seen, based on the information that's been shared with us by our local partners, is that they have a lower success rate in getting them repaid because they're not getting it when they need it. They're getting it when it's their turn. And so we're encouraging these groups to try to move to something closer to this model because we found it to be more successful for them, not just for the organizations that is helping them put it together. But yeah, so they do run all different styles. So I'm really excited to see the impact that these are going to have. I won't know for sure until the end of the year exactly how well it's going, but our partners are telling us that it's going very well, that they are having increase again in the number of people who are able to get loans. And then we also know that their profits are going to increase at the end of the year. So right now our partners are in Cameroon and Burundi. Our partners in Congo, we need to wait for some things to kind of settle down there with the rebels. There's conversation about, a peace treaty between the rebels in Congo. I don't know if that's actually going to happen right now. Nothing has changed. So we're holding tight on our Congo partners, but we're hoping that they're going to be able to come into the fold in the future. So positive aspects of this pilot program. Oh, I'm sorry. Question.
Can you go back one picture?
Absolutely.
Were you taking the picture on the left?
They sent it to me.
Oh, because it looks like a fun group.
Yes, because every time they bring call it Federal Reserve loan to them, they'll go and meet the women and they'll take some pictures for us. So yeah, so that was some of the ladies. They were running their meeting, but they had their additional funds. So some of the positive aspects of this pilot program that we've seen so far. Number one is probably my favorite because it keeps the control in the hands of the women. And I love that these women are being empowered to do even more within their communities. It's pretty frequent when I'm in a group, I will ask how many of them know how to read or write. And many of them do not know how. And that's very sad, but it also means that they can rely on these other women to help them achieve more for themselves because they don't know how to read or write, but others in their group do. And it's more likely that the ones that know how to read or write are going to be the board members. But that shows a lot of trust that they're trusting these other women who do have that capability to be able to run this for them. And so I love the way that they're supporting each other and that we don't have to take the control away from them. Also, it limits the workload for our partner organizations. So before, with our other loans, which we continue to do, it is a decent amount of work for our partner organizations in these locations because they have to take the loan applications, review them with the women. They only really give us the loan applications that they think we should consider giving a loan to. So it's work for them. It's very valuable work, but it's still work. Where this really does not increase the amount of work that they have to do beyond taking the money from us and giving the money to them. That's all they really need to do. Location, the loans are really being made where they're needed most, right in these villages, and they know who needs a loan more than our local partner does. So when it's time to start growing rice, they're ready with a loan because now they can give more loans for more capacity. And then also that it's increasing their profits, like we said, because they're charging each other interest and they are getting to keep the profits from that interest. Yes.
Just curious about the women keeping control.
Mhm.
I worked with another organization called Soho that was doing microloans to women.
Oh, cool.
And they eventually had to get contracts and have the men sign that they would not take the money because the women were being really successful with their businesses. But if their husbands or men got their hands on it, all of a sudden it was gone. Have you
Yeah.
had that kind of experience?
We definitely have had men taking the money. It's interesting. I guess it would make me wonder that when the men sign that, do they actually do they fulfill on it? I don't know. I'd love to hear from that organization if they think that the men are honoring the documents that they signed. Yeah,
It's a no.
but it's an ongoing
Make
issue.
your point, yeah.
It's an ongoing issue that the men will get involved and take some of the funds.
Yeah, while I've got the microphone. Okay, no, I would like, I mean, Sarah, it would take 10 lifetimes and thousands of local partners to accomplish what you've accomplished here. And I want to know, is there some umbrella already set up that you can tap into? I mean, this is like humanly impossible to do all you're doing.
Well,
Could you just talk a little bit more about organization?
yep.
Unless you're 330 years old and don't look at.
So you're wondering, how are we going to be able to grow it? Oh, yes. I mean, it's really because of my local partners. I mean, I'm doing some of it, but they're the ones on the ground every day. Yeah. It's me. I do have a board, but yes, I'm the one doing the majority of what's needed because I'm the one that's going and spending time with these organizations. So my board has to rely on what I tell them because they don't have firsthand experience. And I would love for people to have the ability to go with me. Just most people don't have that flexibility in their life structure to be able to go to some of these places. And I tell them that, you don't have to go for as long as I go for. You could just go for a week or two. So far, I haven't had anybody come, but I offer adult study abroad. So if anybody wants to come, but yeah, so far it really is just me. And my local partners help me. No. Mm-mm. Mm-mm. So, yeah, so I will go on. So another piece of what we're doing in addition to the loans is that we are continuing to give these groups financial literacy, and we're having conversations with them ongoing about what issues are they facing and how can we help them. So I'll give an example. one of my groups in Burundi is an area that has the very high inflation that we talked about last week. They're at about 25% inflation. So when they talk about interest rates, they're typically charging each other 10% monthly interest because of the inflation that they're experiencing. So when I was talking through with the group and we were just kind of brainstorming, and I was kind of starting to ask them the idea of us acting like a Federal Reserve, they said, well, what if we gave you loans so that you can give each other more loans? And they liked the idea, but one of the things that they said that we had to have a conversation about is they said, oh, well, let's say we can do twice as many loans. Well, we could lower our interest rate. So that was a conversation that we had to have. And I said, well, unless if you were in a vacuum, I know they don't know that term, but you do, that would work. But with your inflation, you're not going to make any profit. And they don't have the financial knowledge to understand that. They thought, oh, well, if we have twice as many loans, we could have half the interest rate and end up with the same amount of money. That would be true if there wasn't that really high inflation. So I said to them, of course, you get to decide your interest rates. But if you drop it to 5, you're going to use up 3 or 4% of that in inflation, and you won't have any actual profit. I said, so if you want to actually increase your profit, you need to keep the interest rates where they are if your goal is to increase your profits with these new loans that you're receiving. So those are the types of conversations that we're having with them. And they're feeling vulnerable enough to say, I don't understand. And then we can talk through it again. Because then at that point, the board understood. And I said, you take it to your group. I mean, you run this. I don't. You guys decide the interest rate. But I want to make sure that you have all of the information when you go to decide. For example, if it is going to be 5% where you don't have to pay as much interest, but you make less profit, or you stay at the 10% and you are able to increase your profit at the end of the year. That group did decide to stay at 10%, but it was such a valuable conversation because it could have been maybe a whole year later before we figured out why did their profits go down? Because they changed the interest rate without understanding the impact that it would have. So I love that we get to have those ongoing conversations with them, and they do frequently come to us when we're continuing to attend their meetings to ask questions, and we need to have that relationship with them. I have to see them more than a few times where they can let down those barriers and be vulnerable and ask a question. So here's another question for you, and this is kind of similar to what we talked about last week. Is your house an asset? Well, like we said from last week, an asset is something that you can sell, or you could, take a loan against it. But for them, they cannot sell their houses because nobody can get a mortgage, and they can't take a loan out against their houses because there is no bank that would do that for them. So I bring this up because I wanted to tell you a story about one of my groups. So one of my groups in Burundi, I think I shared before that I was traveling out to see one of the schools that they were working on. So one of my partner organization also runs schools for girls. And some of the teachers there have created their own VSLA, their own savings group. And I will share, it's predominantly women teachers, but there are some male teachers, and they do let the men be in the group. The women run it, but the men can participate. But in these groups of teachers, they were telling me about how they have a problem of their teachers being house poor in a different way than we say house poor. So the teachers have a fairly regular income versus many other people in those societies that would maybe do farming, that it's very irregular. A teacher would be an example of one that has a fairly regular income. So anytime they would have a little bit of extra money, they would invest it in their house. They would buy a window, or they would buy a better door. So then when they got to the end of their teaching, I mean, they don't have retirement like we have, but whenever they stopped teaching, they ran into a problem that now they have this nice house, but they they can't get any money out of it. It's not like they can take a loan against their house like we would do to pay for medicine or clothing. So they end up becoming house poor because they used all of their money to improve their house, but they can't actually do anything with their house. So we kind of had the conversation. Their house is really only worth what something is worth, the structure that you are inside of, versus us. Usually, many times our biggest asset might be our house. It's not really an asset for them. So we had the conversation with them. Okay, so we want to maybe get you guys away from having your little bit of extra money going into your house because they're realizing the problem that causes. But what do I do with a little extra money in this really high inflation environment? So the conversation that we had with them is their group is now actually taking a portion of their money together and collectively raising livestock, because livestock is something that actually is an asset because they can sell it. So that was a really cool conversation. I mean, that came over the course of several weeks. This didn't happen all in one meeting. But they shared the challenge, and then over a course of time, we talked about this. And so this is the first group that I know of that is actually raising money together. But I'm really excited to see the impacts that's going to have because they're starting to solve a problem that they have. So another story I'll tell you, and unfortunately, the people in this group that I'd like you to see, it's outside of it. But this was one of my groups in Burundi. And so I walked up to this group and they were meeting kind of inside of this house. And I saw that there was this group of ladies and then two men sitting outside the group, quietly sitting there. And I asked what was going on. So what had happened is they're having their meeting. You see her with her ledger and her box. Well, two of the women had passed away. And they allowed the men to basically be silent partners in the group. So they can continue to make deposits and benefit from the group like their wives were doing, but they can't make any decisions. So I think they had that conversation of what do we do? But they said, well, it's only going to hurt the children if we kick the men out, because they're now left to take care of the children. So it was a really interesting time to see a group of women having a meeting with the men on the outside. We don't see that often. But it was really cool to see that they're still trying to, support their community. So a few more of our VSLA groups. Let me catch up on so let's talk about the impact that we're having with both of these groups. So a big one, we're avoiding predatory lenders. So many times in the past, when people wanted to get a loan, they might get a loan from like a supplier when they wanted to sell beans. Well, sometimes the way that these loans were repaid to the supplier was not in a safe way. So we're avoiding these debts to their suppliers. And then we are avoiding unsafe relationships. So many times these women would seek out unsafe relationships with new men in order to try to take care of their families. So now women have an opportunity to avoid these unsafe relationships. Another one, education. This is a huge one. When they have a little bit of extra funds, they hopefully now have enough funds to not only educate their boys, but to also educate their girls. So that's a huge thing, that conversation that we're having with our organization a lot is saying, anecdotally, what can you tell us about, are more of their daughters going to school because these women are a step up in the amount of income that they had from before. And then we're also hoping that this is going to help start breaking this child marriage cycle. The women know that the child marriage doesn't usually work out. However, if they have no other option than to sell their daughters, they sell their daughters. But if they have a way in which to support themselves and all of their children without selling their daughters, we hope to be able to break that cycle of child marriage. It's going to take a lot of things to break child marriage, but hopefully this is going to be one piece of it. So that's a little bit about the impact, and then what's next. So we're going to try to continue to expand our impact. So as I shared with you, we currently have 5 of these little banks because it's a pilot program. But assuming that this calendar year goes well and all of these banks are able to repay their principal, we then plan to expand the amount of banks that we'll work with. And one of the conversations that we had with our local partners is we're only going to work with banks who have already had maybe 2 years of successfully running their banks, from start to end, so that we know that we're supporting organizations that are well run. They might all be run slightly differently, but we want to make sure that they are actually running through the cycles with profits at the end and everybody getting their deposits back at the end. So we really do hope to expand the number of groups that we're working with, hopefully maybe bring Congo in if things can settle down there. So that's something that I really hope that we continue to do. And then personally, in the fall, I'm headed to Pakistan. Not only do we want to expand some of the work that we're doing, but I also want to learn a little bit more. So there's a part of Sharia law that Pakistan is adopting that is no interest on loans. So this is something that they're trying to adapt by 2028. And so that means when they go and get a loan, there is no interest rate. However, there are other things that they do instead. So a couple of the things that they do instead of interest on these loans, they'll do where the bank will actually purchase the assets and then sell them back to the customer at a higher price. That's one way that the banks will make money. Another one is they'll do it as like a joint venture. So the customer gradually buys the pieces that they needed back from the bank. So the bank keeps finding different ways instead of interest to be able to make a profit. And I want to learn not only what impact will this have on the women, positive, negative, something else, but again, as we say, the women are constantly evolving to figure out what they need to do to survive. So I think we might have some learnings from these groups of they'll figure out something different to do so that they can continue to function without interest. And then maybe we'll be able to take those learnings and bring them to some of our other groups. So I hope to continue to be able to learn and then bring that information to our partner organizations through that time there. So far, I don't know what I don't know. So I'm always excited for these new areas that I can learn and expand my own knowledge. So when I have these conversations with our partner organizations, I can share it as well. So that is what I am doing next. So questions?
Oh, I'm sorry. How do the women and you also avoid intrusive males who want to just kind of take over the whole thing, reap the collective benefits that have been accrued and just abscond with the money, and all the women are left in financial disaster, physical disaster,
Yep.
and you as well?
Yeah, it is an ongoing concern. And that is why we typically are trying to work with banks that have already had a year or two of successfully running in hopes that the community is actually supporting what they're doing. But it's an ongoing concern. And we have to rely on the local partners and these groups of women that they feel confident that they can run these banks.
You say you're going to Pakistan
Yes.
in the fall.
Yes.
Are there any organizations already there doing?
I have a partner organization that I'm going to meet with.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're not totally alone.
Yeah, I will arrive alone and I will meet and I'll spend time with them and then
go from there.
Yeah, and then go from there. Yeah.
How do local sanctioned banks or banks that are chartered, if they are chartered by local government, view the foundation's banking activity?
These VSLAs.
Like in Burundi,
Yeah.
Cameroon, are there banking systems? And how do they view your activity outside of, established banking?
I think most of them are pretty supportive because they do recognize that they can serve a certain part of the population, but that's the population who has ID, who has collateral. They know that these women, it's not like these women could come to them instead. They don't have either the ability to get there, but also all of their requirements. So in general, I do sometimes meet with banks, and in general, they are very supportive.
I would be hopeful for exponential growth with an effort like this, but I'm just wondering if there's a threshold, a financial threshold where local banking would perceive you as a competitor.
Yep. And I think not some, and I also worry when it comes to threshold, a little bit less maybe on the banks and more on the local governing bodies wanting to take a piece of it. Because, and I do pay bribes. I don't remember if I was talking about that last week, but it's frequent in the work that I'm doing that I do need to pay bribes in order to get some things done. Not only personally, I mean, they'll bribe me when I'm going through an airport and things, but also for my women, if they are trying to get a certificate in hair braiding. So I'll tell them, okay, you save up for the materials that you need or the cost of the certificate, and then I pay the bribe that inevitably we have to pay to the local official to even get them the chance to take that test to get their certificate. And it's always that debate. Yes, I could push back on these bribes, but what happens then? Yes, I didn't pay the few dollars, but the woman didn't get her certificate. So I guess it's somebody else's fight to push back on some of these bribes when it actually affects the women's ability to progress, because I don't want them to not get their certificate because I'm trying to push back on this concept of bribes. So I pay it for them and somebody else can make that fight. So, but it's an ongoing thing. So I do worry that if our impact got too big, that the local officials would get wind of it and want to be trying to get some money out of it. And at some point we might get there. And I guess that will be a conversation I'll have to have with the local partners. Like, hey, how much money do we have to pay them to leave us alone? And then I guess have that conversation if it makes sense, but it's just the reality of how things work.
All the different countries you go to, do your partners there have an interpreter set up? Do you have somebody with you at all times?
No, I only have somebody with me when we're having a meeting that either sometimes my local partners will speak English most of the time that they do. So they will be interpreters. But if I'm going to have a meeting and they're not there, sometimes I'll hire an interpreter to come with me. When I was in Bolivia, I was using a virtual interpreter because I had cell service that was good enough to be able to have a virtual one. The places that I was meeting in what's called El Alto. And it was a city about 45 minutes outside of the city that most of the people would be living in. That would be a translator. So it didn't make sense for them to travel. So they would join me virtually. But no, not traveling around with me. I get by. I mean, if they speak a language that is on Google Translate, I'll use that. If they don't, they know that it's highly unlikely that I speak their local language. And so we figure it out without words. So, but people will approach me if they speak English, they'll approach me either just to chat or see if I need something.
I can tell you don't like to talk about yourself, but have you always been fearless? Seriously, serious.
Yeah, probably. I did my sophomore year of college. I did a year in Thailand. And so I do think that was maybe the start of my love for travel and kind of traveling off the beaten path. And I used to travel a fair amount when I was married, but not to quite as rural areas that I traveled to now. But yeah, I love the humanity and the people that I get to meet when I'm doing it. So.
How do you research for your partners? Like, how do you find them, especially like in the countries where you're not speaking their language? You know?
Some partners are referred to me by other partners because like I was saying last week, I do try to keep my relationships within like a continent. I'm trying to keep them in countries that are nearby each other, both for ability to travel from one to another, as well as an increase that there's similarities in cultures and way of doing life there. But other times it is, fifth page of Google. That I'm doing a lot of research of trying to find these small ones because I want it to be a local partner. I'm not local. So as much as I'm glad when I see these organizations that are based out of the UK doing work in these countries, love it. But I'm trying to find somebody who is locally run so that I can learn from them and rely on them.
Sarah, last week I was surprised and asked the question about the commonality across countries in Africa in child marriage seemed to be the foundational issue. And then just like, where's Waldo? You pop up in Brazil and now Pakistan. What is the foundational issue for say in Brazil for the issues with women in their situation?
Yep. I would say that they don't have, child marriage is not really happening there because I would, they're more developed. So for them, it's usually being stuck in this cycle when they're living in the favelas. It's their version of a slum. It's just Portuguese for slum. And so trying to give them the ability to step up a little bit higher standard of living than they're currently experiencing. But yes, from a relationship standpoint, there is some dominance from the men, but not nearly as much as some of my African countries. And then I'll have to report back about Pakistan. So.
Okay, who are local partners? Are they individuals? Are they businesses? Are they churches?
They're locally run nonprofits in these countries. Yep. Yep. So yeah, they're never individuals. They're always vetted organizations because I need to trust them because I'm sending them money. They're my go-between because all the women, whether it's an individual loan or it's these village savings and loans groups, all of it functions in cash. They don't have bank accounts like we said. So I have to send the money to the organization and then trust that the organization then gives the women physical cash. So I have to have that trust with them. And so far, I've not had any issues.
You've mentioned small amounts of loans, $25, $50. How much money has your foundation been able to give?
Oh, that's a great question. I should know that number for you because we get our loans repaid. I just had a $2,000 transfer from my partner in Uganda. So not only was that money given out, but now it's going to be given out again. I should work on that answer for you. I'll give you my card and I'll give you an answer. I should have that. I'm sorry.
Thank you for your presentation. It's been very informative. You spent most of last week talking about the program of giving microloans and to individuals. And the latter part of your presentation today, you were talking about the community savings and loan associations. Is that where you're trying to transition your foundation to move to that kind of a model?
I think so. I don't want to completely do away with the individual loans because I think that there is definitely a need for them. But the more that we're doing this, the more it seems to really make sense. So I don't know, in a place like Brazil, I think we probably continue to do individual loans, but most of our partner organizations, like in Uganda, they had individual loans and they are looking at kind of transitioning to this model. And yeah, it really just came out of my time with them learning and seeing, oh, wait a second, what we thought was a good way to do it, there might be a better way to do it. So yeah, so I do kind of hope to transition at least a good portion of the way in which we do our loans the secondary way. So as long as it continues to show success. And I'm always open to changing. If we do it and it didn't work out the way we thought it would, okay, why didn't it? I need to learn more. I need to see more, and then we'll hopefully adapt as needed. So,
Sarah, I have a question.
Yeah.
You make a very compelling story for all of us here. How would one make a contribution to the organization?
I will my cards are up here, so you can make a contribution directly on the website, or you can send a check. We are a 501c3, so we can send you a receipt for that. And if anybody has interest in volunteering or being on the board or being engaged further, I always love to have additional people helping. But yes, if you'd like to make a donation, I'll give you one of my cards. And your money goes a far away. I don't remember if I said it last week, but the way that we're running right now is 100% of donations go to loans. I pay all my travel expenses when I'm going there, and any other additional things I take care of. So I never am using any of the donations for a plane ticket or something like that. And I also do not pay myself. So 100% of any donations go directly to the loans.
we've all heard the saying, with three or more are gathered together. And to me, it is that empowering women to help one another and empowering relationships to hold people through struggle. And that is, the essence of the change.
I
in my
agree.
mind.
I agree. It's so much. I mean, these loans can be a lot to the women, but the community that the women are able to have with each other is just as valuable. I completely agree.
I was just wondering what kind of work how could a volunteer help you?
Yeah, there's a variety. I mean, sometimes I have paperwork that I need to go through from my partner organizations, sometimes research that I need to go through, but also, I need to get better about the fundraising. So I need to work on probably sending more requests for donations. So that might be an opportunity as well. But yeah, some people like reviewing the loans when I'm getting individual requests from organizations, and they'll go through, review them. Sometimes I get them handwritten. So even just like transcribing them into a document so that we have them typed out, not handwritten. So it can be a combination of things. And sometimes just a sounding board. I need to have other people's, opinions and thoughts on things other than just mine. So that can be just as valuable. Anything else? Well, good. Thank you so much for joining me for 2 weeks in a row. So, and if you think of questions, please reach out to me. I'm always happy to share. Thank you.